Welcome back to The Explainer. So today, we're unraveling a story that honestly feels like a pure myth, but it actually stems from a very real, profound, historical event in ancient India. We're going to explore the awe-inspiring Maithili folk tale of Bodhi Kayastha. It's a story about absolute, unshakable devotion, a literal miracle, and the kind of inner purity that actually forced the laws of nature to just bend. It's an incredible narrative, and the historical records we're looking at are absolutely going to reframe how you think about faith and duty.
Okay, let's dive right into this. We're transporting ourselves straight back to the ancient kingdom of Mithila, over in the Indian subcontinent. Now, Mithila wasn't just a place of political power. It was this profound, beating heart of culture, philosophy, and spirituality. We're talking about a highly traditional society where everyday life and deep-rooted spiritual beliefs were completely intertwined. You couldn't separate the two. And it's exactly within this rich, deeply devout cultural canvas that our incredible story unfolds.
You know, what makes this whole thing so compelling is how it bridged across entire generations. This didn't just start as some bedtime fairy tale. It began as a real, documented, historical event centered around a man named Bodhi Kayastha. The event was actually so profound that it was later officially recorded by the renowned scholar Jyotirishwar in his famous Sanskrit text, the Purush Pariksha. And if that wasn't enough to cement it in history, it eventually inspired one of the absolute most legendary figures in Maithili literature, the great poet Videha. So we're looking at a singular moment in time that literally echoed through centuries of literature.
So, who exactly was the man at the center of this legend? Well, meet our protagonist, Bodhi Kayastha. Bodhi was a courtier. He served directly under the king of Mithila, so he was a man of serious status. He pulled in a very respectable salary from the king, and his everyday life was spent navigating the absolute highest echelons of power. I mean, he was constantly surrounded by immense wealth, non-stop political maneuvering, and literally all the worldly temptations you'd expect to find living inside a royal court.
But now, what's really interesting about this contrast we're looking at is his reality versus his environment. On one hand, you got the typical courtier's life, right? Constant temptations, the ruthless pursuit of power, greed. But despite all of that around him, Bodhi's character was absolutely spotless. I mean, totally devoid of lust and violence. In fact, instead of hoarding all those riches available to him, he just took exactly what he needed for a simple life and donated the rest of his wealth to charity and to society. In a world totally defined by excess, Bodhi lived a life of total restraint and extreme generosity.
Let's just take a quick breather here to understand what actually fueled this guy. Bodhi's pure lifestyle wasn't just about trying to be a good person. It was deeply, deeply rooted in his unwavering, total devotion to Lord Shiva, who is affectionately known in that region as Bhola Baba. This deep-seated spiritual foundation, that was his anchor. It was the quiet, persistent engine driving his flawless conduct right in the middle of this totally chaotic, cutthroat royal court. Now, to understand where this story is heading, we really need to wrap our heads around a very specific cultural concept called Gangalab. In the traditions of Mithila, Gangalab is basically the ultimate spiritual resolution. It's this conscious, deeply revered choice to attain salvation by voluntarily traveling to and eventually passing away on the banks of the holy river Ganges. It's considered the absolute highest spiritual goal a person can achieve at the very end of their life. Keep that definition in your back pocket, because it completely sets the stakes for Bodhi's final life decision.
So, as old age inevitably creeps up on him, Bodhi makes his choice. It was time for Gangalab. And guys, the emotional weight of this moment is just staggering. He's abandoning everything. He's leaving his comfortable home, he's walking away from his lifelong, prestigious service to the king, and he is bidding a final farewell to his beloved family. He's embarking on his final, spiritually resolute journey, trading all the security of his worldly life for a brutal, grueling path towards salvation. Just stop and think for a second about exactly what he was leaving behind here. Courtly power, a guaranteed royal salary, his family and loved ones, all of his worldly comforts, and any lingering materialistic desires. Gone. And remember, this wasn't some modern, comfortable road trip. This was an agonizingly arduous physical journey undertaken entirely on foot by an old man. It was a journey driven 100% by unshakable spiritual conviction. But as he walked, step after step, mile after mile, the journey really started to fracture him. His aging body began to break down. The harsh elements, the sheer exhaustion, and the immense physical demand of this pilgrimage were just rapidly draining the life right out of him. The narrative tension here is so palpable. His spirit is entirely willing, but his human form is rapidly, undeniably failing. And then, tragedy strikes.
Just as he is finally nearing his destination, his body gives out completely. He collapses. The heartbreaking reality here is that he is stranded roughly 1.5 kilometers, which translates to nearly 4.5 miles, away from the riverbank, and he cannot take another step. After a lifetime of spotless devotion, after giving up literally everything he had, he has seemingly failed his ultimate goal, just a few miles short of the finish line.
Utterly paralyzed, Bodhi uses his final breaths not to despair, but to call out in pure devotion to the river. Will Mother Ganga hear his call from this far away? I mean, this is it. This is the ultimate suspenseful test of his lifelong faith. He doesn't have any extreme penances to offer. There are no grand rituals for him to perform. It's just the raw, unvarnished plea of a man who has lived a completely pure life.
And that brings us to the incredible climax of the story, because right there, in the dirt, a miracle happens. The holy river Ganges literally alters her course. Mother Ganga breaks her ancient boundaries and surges across the land, traveling those final 4.5 miles herself just to embrace her true devotee. The water comes to him. It is a stunning, mind-blowing testament that true, unyielding faith can literally bend the physical rules of nature.
So what does this all mean? The crucial takeaway is this. Bodhikaya Stanchya achieved direct entry to heaven, direct salvation, without subjecting himself to the extreme, torturous physical penances that were so incredibly common in his era. How? Because the purity of his lifelong actions, his daily kindness, his steadfast honesty, his quiet, humble devotion, that mattered infinitely more to the divine than performing traditional, elaborate rituals. His everyday life was his ultimate prayer.
This represents a truly lasting spiritual triumph. The core moral embedded in this ancient source material is incredibly clear. True devotion and a genuinely spotless character yield the ultimate reward. It proves that earthly limitations, even the complete physical failure of an old man's body, are completely irrelevant when faced with a pure heart. It's a powerful message that completely transcends time, and honestly, it feels incredibly relevant even to us today.
And this brilliantly illustrates exactly why this story didn't just fade into the background of history. The legendary poet Videha was so moved, so inspired by this profound act of divine grace, that he wrote the immortal words, "Bara sukh sar paul tu a tir." That translates roughly to finding ultimate profound peace on those banks. Videha's literary masterpiece essentially cemented Bodhi's legacy right into the very DNA of Maithili culture forever. The story became a timeless song.
Which really leaves us with a final, pretty powerful question. Does our modern society value external rituals and performative actions way more than the quiet internal purity of heart that Bodhikaya possessed? It is something to deeply consider as we navigate our own busy, loud lives. True devotion might not look at all like what we think it does. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. I really hope this story leaves you inspired to reflect on the true meaning of devotion in your own life. Keep learning, and I'll catch you next time.